In the news this week, border madness, protests brewing at WA's border as regional communities forced to make a return trip down under. A WAMA News exclusive.
COVID rules in WA to face dramatic changes over definitions with the scrapping of casual contacts.
High hopes, One Nation's Paul Pauline confident of party success as he nominates for the Senate in the federal election.
Chinese New Year celebrations as the Year of the Tiger approaches, plus Dr. Andrew Miller's comment.
This is The Evening News with Ivan Loom and Maliva Thorne.
Good evening. WA's border controversy has taken a new turn with growing tensions in regional communities leading to threats to protests at the state's northern border if the crossing issues for residents aren't resolved soon. Frustrated residents who are trying to return are vowing to set up camp and demonstrate near the WA's border if that's what it takes. Deb Hunter is a returning resident who joined me exclusively to talk about the potential protest and the community's hardship of trying to return. Deb, thanks for joining us. First, the potential protest at WA's northern border. What will be the bottom line that triggers it?
Well, basically the bottom line will be that the people that are trying to transit across the WA-NT border, we are prepared to gather at the border and create another refugee camp like in March 2020. And we will sit there and we will hopefully get as much media attention as possible until something has to be done about it. But there are many people already that are willing to drive to the border and sit and wait.
What about the town folks in Kununurra? What do they reckon?
There has been a lot of chatter on our two community pages. I made people aware days ago of the situation, and the residents that are at home are very, very shocked that this situation is going on because they were not aware of it. Now, the people that are at home are fairly backing us. They are prepared to meet us at the border and protest there if needs must be. We would prefer not to go to that extreme, but yeah, we've got great support. You've got to understand we've got businesses in Kununurra that are now looking at bankruptcy and closing because the owners of those businesses are stuck in Darwin and they can't get home. They can't fulfil contracts that they've signed. They can't finish jobs that they're meant to be doing. I just spoke to one lady who has had to sack her staff. She lives and resides in Darwin, but her business is in WA. And she's had to sack her WA staff because they can't transit back and forward across the NT-WA border now. So it is destroying businesses, it is destroying people's livelihoods, and yeah, it's just hard to fathom how hard they're making it for us to get home.
Are you able to describe what you're going through at the moment?
At the moment, we're trying to hold out until the 5th of February to return to WA. I represent at the moment quite a few other returning residents that live and work in Kununurra, which is on the border of the West Australian Northern Territory border. So there's only two entry points into Western Australia from the rest of the country. One's down in the Eucla, the other one is the WA border at Kununurra. At the moment, there is a criteria from the West Australian government that nobody is allowed to cross the WA-NT border other than freight and logistics. So that means that all of us that are currently either transiting to Darwin or in Darwin waiting for the 5th of February so we can come across the border are now being told we cannot proceed across the border via road. And if Northern Territory stays as an extreme state, there will be no air travel into the state from Darwin either. So basically, even though Mark McGowan is saying that WA residents can return home, we don't have an access route now.
Do you find it crazy that you are so close yet you're so far away?
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. So close yet so far. So the drive from Darwin to Kununurra, to CBD of Kununurra, if we can call it that, bless our little town, is 886 kilometres. It takes a day. Comfortable drive. what we're being told we're going to have to do is drive from Darwin down to South Australia, then across South Australia into WA and pass through the Eucla border, and then do a 1,700 kilometre drive to Perth, isolate in Perth for 15 days, and then do the 4,000 kilometre drive back up the entire state of WA to Kununurra. So yeah, to say that it's a long drive is an understatement. It's just not possible at the moment because the Stewart Highway, which is the route we'd have to travel, is closed due to flooding. So, and apparently that could take up to 17 days, even without any more rain, before they can even go and assess the damage. So we are literally cut off from WA unless we can transit across the NT-WA border at Kununurra. There's no other way in.
So what needs to be done to rectify this issue?
The Police Commissioner, Chris Dawson, needs to create a travel bubble that makes for safe transit for returning residents across the NT-WA border at Kununurra. That's what we're asking.
Deb, thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, thank you very much.
And now we have some good news on this matter, is that the government has backflipped on the northern border entry issue. Kimberley MP Davina Deanna confirmed that from February 5th, people who live in East Kimberley and 200 kilometres within the border who can provide proof of their residence and who are approved travellers can enter by road via Kununurra and undergo quarantine at their homes. Certainly good outcome indeed. The WA government has announced new plans to combat COVID and deal with rising Omicron cases within the community.
In a press conference, Premier McGowan announced that once caseloads are recorded within the community, new COVID-19 positive case protocols will be implemented.
People who test positive to COVID will have to self-isolate for a minimum of 7 days rather than 14. If no symptoms show after 7 days, then they're free to return to everyday life. In addition to this, casual contacts will be removed and a new definition of close contact will be introduced. A close contact will become a household member or intimate partner of someone with COVID. Anyone who spent 15 minutes face-to-face or 2 hours in a room with an infectious person without a mask, or someone who has been contacted by WA Health in regards to being a close contact. Rapid antigen tests will be implemented throughout the self-isolation process. WA's approach is following that of South Australia, with some adaptation to fit our state's unique position. WA will also introduce strict rules for critical workers who are asymptomatic. Close contacts to continue to work in an effort to balance the threat of COVID with the needs of the WA community. The state government will also soon bring WA COVID care at home to the table, in an effort to help monitor and care for COVID patients in their homes. Steve Anderson, WAMN News.
A One Nation candidate has high hopes of the party as he nominates for a Senate seat at this year's federal election. Paul Filing is giving people a voice through the party, confident it can grab seats in the Senate and lower house, but his candidacy has drawn comments from community leaders. Nelson Liu reports.
Pauline Hanson's One Nation has vowed to back Western Australian voters as it pushes its campaign for the federal election. The party has introduced new candidates in a number of key electorates, with Paul Filing nominating for a seat for the party in the Senate. Mr Filing has put himself forward to promote One Nation as a minor party, giving its voters a strong and consistent voice. He's criticised Premier McGowan and Prime Minister Scott Morrison's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, questioning the Premier and Prime Minister's leadership.
The Senate candidate, my number one lead Senate candidate for Western Australia, I'm proud to announce Paul Filing. So Paul is a former Member of Parliament. He actually was on the crossbench with me in 1996 as an independent. He's very astute, knowledgeable, practical, very dedicated to Western Australia. He is a businessman. He has a lot to offer. And most importantly to me is that it's about loyalty.
In the case of Western Australia, we've become cut off from the rest of our country. When I became an Australian citizen, after emigrating here from the United Kingdom, I believed Australia was one nation. People are proud to be part of One Nation, And when you've got a Premier who has used emergency powers in a way that is way, way beyond his prerogative to close off the state from essentially the rest of the world, you have to ask yourself, is the Labor Party in his case, and more importantly, the Liberal Party in the federal government's case, up to the job?
Mr Farling believes One Nation has a strong chance to win a Senate seat, but also 1 or 2 seats in the House of Representatives. Joining Paul Farling are candidates Brenton Johansson, who is contesting the seat of Durack, and Aaron Malloy for Pearce. Meanwhile, multicultural leader Suresh Rajan has commented on Paul Farling's nomination.
The party is a niche party. It appeals to a particular type of person, and fortunately or unfortunately, that type of person is fast disappearing from the landscape. We're starting to see less racism around the place, and that means that there are less people who will be voted in on a One Nation ticket.
At this stage, the federal election is anticipated to be held in May. Nelson Liu, WAMN News.
Investigation continues into the Huntingdale tragedy, where a father has reportedly killed 2 children before turning the gun onto himself. It happened on Friday at around 6:35 p.m. Police were called to the property on Essington Street and found the deceased 40-year-old father, a 6-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl. Forensic officers were at the scene over the weekend collecting potential evidence, as authorities treated the incident as double murder and suicide case. The Deputy Commissioner says the incident has caused extreme grief and trauma for the families involved. Police stated continual support and assistance will be provided to those affected.
The investigation is now being led by the Major Crime Division with the support of the Homicide Squad and District Detectives. The exact cause of death and the circumstances will be thoroughly investigated, and this will take some time. But I tell you, at this stage, we are treating this incident as a double murder-suicide.
I think what we need to learn from this is to match our rhetoric with practice. Our rhetoric around the importance of mental health is fantastic. And our practice in relation to mainstream mental health, despite some inadequacies, is not too bad. But when it comes to the gap between rhetoric and practice in terms of called communities, there is a massive gap. And what we need to learn is, and hopefully, with Amber-Jade Sanderson as our new Health and Mental Health Minister, things will change.
Homeless advocates are concerned that the latest COVID-19 mandate will have a dramatic impact on the lives of the underprivileged. So far, only 39% of 51 Indigenous homeless people in Perth are double vaccinated, and only 1 out of the 51 people surveyed was triple vaccinated. Homeless campaigner Jessie Noakes says the most vulnerable have no place to self-isolate, and placing COVID mandates on homeless people will remain as a major challenge.
Is the most sweeping set of rules we've probably seen in peacetime in generations. I don't think homeless people know what's coming. There's no information for them out on the streets. There's certainly no outreach. And I think if we try and get between someone living on the streets and the basic things they need to keep themselves safe and stable, we could be in for a really chaotic experience.
This week on WAMN Extra News Club, we have plenty of stories, including Dr. Andrew Miller's response on how to prepare yourself, your family and particularly children to self-isolate at home. What are the basic things you need and how to plan for it before it's too late? Also, we discussed variant X and whether Western Australia is ready for the new COVID variant. We have an interview with Australian Nursing Union WA Secretary Mark Olsen. All that and other top weekend stories available now on the WAMN Extra News Club. You can subscribe via the link in the description. The Australian Arab Association in WA, on the other hand, successfully held its own Australia Day celebration, with free sausages and multicultural entertainment for the Thornley community. Hundreds of people came to Homestead Park throughout the day to enjoy community performances, while kids had fun with castles and water slides. The event turnout has been higher than usual despite concerns over Omicron.
Obviously everyone happy and everyone looking for something to do during the events. We don't have that much events happening because of COVID obviously. But yeah, all the community respond amazing actually, and they all love it, and we have really amazing feedbacks, and everyone happy about the event. We have the Chinese dancers, we have the Italiano musicians as well, and we have the piping bands came as well. Yeah, and it was a beautiful day, like absolutely beautiful.
The Chinese New Year Festival is coming next week in Perth CBD, with major celebrations coming next Sunday. The theme for 2022 will be based on the Year of the Tiger, with the animal symbolising bravery, confidence and competitiveness. This year the festival will be held at the Perth Cultural Centre on the 6th of February, hosted by Chongwa Association. Despite the spread on Omicron, the association's president is positive that this year's turnout won't be affected.
I hope more people will join us to celebrate Chinese New Year. Compared with you, we have additional 12 animal zodiac displayed on the night. We will welcome all Western Australians and come and join the Lantern Festival with us too.
Speaking about Chinese zodiacs, Melly, what's yours?
Well, Ivan, I was born in 2000, the year of the dragon. What about you?
Mine's. You sure want to know?
Yeah,
it's the year
I'm
of the
curious.
snake.
Ah, I wonder who would win in a fight, a dragon or a snake?
We'll find out after the newscast. And now, here's AMA-WA spokesman, Dr. Andrew Miller, with his weekly COVID-19 update and comment.
Hi, thanks for your time. Western Australia really on the clock now, with 25% of people, it seems, pretty unhappy about the way the border opening has been delayed. So what do we need to do? Number one, we need to get a compassionate family reunion and business travel allowed across the border for people who are vaccinated, particularly if they've had the 3 doses and they are testing negative. To test, we need to utilise our PCR system to its have RAT tests available, so that these are not as good. They're pretty good at showing infectivity, particularly if they're used on. But we do need that convenience for people to be able to get that done, and it would have been folly to open up with no supply of RAT tests, even for healthcare workers in the state, because we've seen what happens over east. Everything grinds to a halt because people simply can't prove that they're negative at a given time, or they don't know that they're positive, and they don't know to isolate, and so then you're just encouraging transmission of this terrible disease. The next thing we need to do, of course, is up the rate of 3rd dose vaccinations, sitting on about 36% for over 18s in WA at the moment. And we need to get the kids, particularly the ones who are going to be in school very soon, vaccinated as quickly as possible to prevent transmission within the schools and prevent childhood illness wherever possible. The threat of long COVID, the rare instance of severe disease, those should be sufficient motivations for us to really have that. Definitely want to avoid the deaths that we're seeing on the East Coast. Just an absolute tragedy, 50 deaths a day in New South Wales, 20 or so in Victoria. These are people who would not have died but for COVID, and so we need to avoid that wherever we can. We don't want the thousands of deaths that they've had over there. We don't want the millions of cases that they've got, 1.1 million in New South Wales, 1,000 in Western Australia. So while it's tough, we know that Western Australia can and will respond. We have no appetite for having this disease spread through our communities and hitting our vulnerable people, our immunosuppressed people, those on chemo, our elderly, our Indigenous populations who are vulnerable, and remembering that 50% of our adult population has coexisting disease, things that make them more vulnerable to COVID, and that doesn't make them any less. That means we need to care for them more. So take care of yourselves. I would say support the public health measures, get tested if you're feeling unwell, and hopefully there's 17 cases a day that we're seeing at the moment. We'll be able to keep a lid on that, because if Omicron comes here, we want it to come here on our terms, because certainly we're going to be living with the virus. Everyone understands we're already living with COVID. Just depends whether you let the virus write the rules, as it is in the East Coast at the moment, or whether we write the rules, as we're doing in WA. Thanks for your time.
That's Dr. Andrew Miller. Here is Leo with what's coming up on 6 News tonight.
Thanks, guys. And on 6 News, celebrations continue following Ash Barty's Australian Open victory, the first Australian to win the women's singles at their home Grand Slam since Chris O'Neill in 1978. Plus, thousands protest in the Canadian capital of Ottawa against COVID-19 vaccine mandates in the country. You can see full details on those stories and plenty more by heading to our YouTube channel. Just search 6 News Australia to find us. or our website at 6newsau.com. For now, though, guys, it's back to you.
Thanks, Leo. And that's our weekly news and current affairs. We have the latest news on our website, wmnnews.com.au.
From Melly and myself, wish you good health, good night. See you next Sunday.
Thanks for watching.